Most people imagine Job as a saint who accepted everything in silence. The truth is different. What really happened required surviving 10 funerals, total ruin, and an illness that turned the skin into open sores. This is the story of Job. In the land of Uz, a man had accumulated 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys. If you walked through his stables at dawn, the dust would rise like a golden mist, and the noise of the animals would fill the valley with the density of an entire marketplace. The first chapter of the book that bears his name calls him the greatest of all the people of the East. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. When his children's feasts were over, he would rise early and offer burnt offerings for each of them, in case any of them had sinned in their hearts. That daily ritual is the first thing the text allows you to see. Not a marble hero, but an anxious father who feared God and turned away from evil. But there is another scene still to be revealed. The one Job never saw. The account opens with a heavenly council. The sons of God present themselves and Satan appears among them. The adversary does not dispute Job's virtue. He disputes his motive. He claims that Job's piety depends on a hedge of protection on his house, his estate, and his blessing. The permission that follows is precise and limited. Everything Job has is placed within the power of that accusation. Only his body is forbidden to be touched. Job does not hear that conversation, nor will you find in the text an explanation delivered to the protagonist. The man of Uz continues offering sacrifices while heaven has already authorized the stripping away of everything he owns. And then, without warning, a single day is enough. A messenger comes running. The Sabaeans have fallen upon the oxen and the female donkeys. The servants have been killed by the edge of the sword. That man is still speaking when the second arrives. Fire from God has fallen from heaven and consumed the 7,000 sheep and the shepherds. The third bursts in with another figure. 3 bands of Chaldeans have carried off the 3,000 camels and put the rest of the servants to the sword. The fourth closes the circle with news no amount of property can equal. A great wind from the desert has struck the 4 corners of the eldest son's house. All 10 siblings were celebrating there. The house has fallen. The young people are dead. Only the bearer of the news has survived. 10 children. Not a single animal from that original list remains in the inventory. 500 yoke of oxen amounted to 1,000 head of working cattle, a plowing force capable of opening fields like those of a modern regional-scale agricultural operation. 3,000 camels were not decoration. They were the heavy fleet of the desert, comparable to a convoy of freight trucks capable of moving trade between oases. 7,000 sheep formed a flock that, gathered together, would cover the grass of an entire stadium. All of that evaporates within hours. The text of Job, chapter 1, verses 13 through 19, compresses the catastrophe into a cadence of messengers that does not let you breathe. Each survivor ends with the same formula. I alone escape to tell you. Job rises. He tears his robe. He shaves his head. He falls to the ground. He worships. He speaks the words that have crossed the centuries. Naked he came from his mother's womb, and naked he will return. The Lord gave. The Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. The narrator adds a dry clause. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrongdoing. That is the first response. It is not the last. On the outside, mourning follows the protocol of the ancient Near East. On the inside, the household no longer exists. Archaeology and Bronze Age parallels help measure what the text takes for granted. Uz is associated in Lamentations chapter 4, verse 21, with the sphere of Edom. Other genealogies connect the name with Aramean lineages. There is no stele that fixes the exact village. What is clear is the type of economy: mixed pastoralism, caravans, yoke agriculture, and a patriarchal household so large that it functions like a village. The Sabians point towards southern Arabia, the world of Sheba. The Chaldeans, within a patriarchal horizon, appear as nomadic bands capable of operating in 3 columns. None of that softens the human fact. The servants are not abstract figures. They are men and women put to the sword in 4 different settings. The book does not provide a body count. It gives you the repetition of blade and fire until you understand that Job's greatness rested upon an entire community. Then comes the second permission. The heavenly council gathers again. The adversary insists, skin for skin. Everything a man has, he will give for his life. The boundary shifts by a hand's breadth. Job is placed in that power. Only his life is reserved. Chapter 2, verse 7 records the blow with a clinical phrase. Satan strikes Job with malignant sores from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. The sick man sits among the ashes and takes a potsherd to scrape himself. The skin broke open. If you approached that heap of ashes, the smell would reach you before the figure did. Later, Job himself describes flesh clothed with worms and crusts of dust, skin that breaks and festers again, bones that burn at night, darkened skin, fever, insomnia, nightmares, and breath that repels. In chapter 19, he says that his relatives have withdrawn, that his acquaintances have forgotten him, that the guests of his house and his maidservants regard him as a stranger, and that his breath is strange to his wife. In chapter 30, he says that his skin has blackened upon him and that his bones burn with fever. That is not a pious portrait. It is a body coming apart in full view of everyone. Doctors and historians have proposed modern interpretations: pemphigus, elephantiasis, leprosy in a broad sense, a generalized ulcerative dermatosis. The text does not diagnose. It leaves you the symptoms and the gesture of the potsherd. Scraping open sores with broken pottery is an image of relief that makes the wound worse. Every pass tears away scabs. Every night brings the burning back, comparing that pain to a 3rd-degree burn spread over the entire body is not literary exaggeration. It is the only contemporary analogy that comes close to an inflammation that leaves no healthy area. And that was where the real challenge began. Losing the flock was not enough. Now the body became the last battlefield. Job's wife, who has buried the same 10 children and watched the estate evaporate, speaks the only sentence the book gives her. Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. The Hebrew permits the harshness of that exhortation. Job replies that she speaks like a foolish woman and formulates another sentence the narrator underlines. Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil? The text adds that in all this, Job did not sin with his lips. The dialogue is brief. The silence that follows is long. She too inhabits the same ashes. The book does not write her a soliloquy. It forces you to measure her sentence against 10 graves. 3 friends hear about all this evil. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite agree to come and mourn with him and comfort him. Teman was a proverbial center of Edomite wisdom. Eliphaz therefore arrives as the representative of a tradition that believes it can explain suffering. When they lift their eyes from a distance, they do not recognize him. They raise their voices and weep. Each tears his robe. They scatter dust over their heads toward heaven, and they sit with him on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights. No one speaks a word to him, because they see that his pain is very great. Job chapter 2, verses 11 through 13. 7 days. That initial silence is the last truly compassionate act of the visit. In ancient mourning, sitting on the ground, tearing one's clothing, and throwing dust upon oneself meant entering into the other person's abyss. 7 days without speaking are the equivalent of a modern wake that no one interrupts with advice. If you have kept vigil over the dead, you recognize that density. Then the mouth opens and the consolation becomes a courtroom. Job speaks in chapter 3 and curses the day of his birth. He does not curse the name. He curses the date. He wants that night to be barren, not to enter among the days of the year, to be claimed by those who curse the day. He asks why he did not die in the womb, why knees received him and breasts nursed him. He envies those who never existed. He describes the grave as a place where the troubled cease and where the servant no longer hears the voice of his master. Proverbial patience breaks here into poetry. The man who blessed the name now asks for his origin to be erased. The record shows something no one expects if all they know is the popular summary. Job does not remain silent. Job brings a case. Eliphaz speaks first. He appeals to a night vision and to a thesis that seems reasonable. What is man that he should be clean? He reminds Job that Job himself used to instruct many, and that now evil has touched him. He implies that the innocent do not perish, and that those who plow iniquity reap it. Bildad appeals to the tradition of earlier generations. Zophar accuses Job of verbosity and claims that God has even overlooked part of Job's iniquity. All 3 revolve around the same axis. Extreme suffering exposes hidden guilt. The retributive theology of the ancient Near East, documented in treaties, proverbs, and hymns, held that the cosmic order returned peace to the righteous and ruin to the wicked. Applied to a man covered in sores, that doctrine becomes a second scourge. The solution created a new problem. Every speech of consolation increases the isolation. Job swears to his integrity. He asks for an arbitrator. He wants his adversary to write an indictment. In chapter 16, he calls his friends miserable comforters. In chapter 19, he drives home one of the most quoted lines in world literature. I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the last he will stand upon the dust. And after this my skin has been destroyed. In my flesh I shall see God. The verse does not cancel the rest of the complaint. It lives alongside it. Job imagines a legal vindicator, someone who will take up his case when his skin is gone. At the same time, he lists brothers who have withdrawn, acquaintances who have forgotten him, servants who do not answer even when he calls, children who despise him, and friends who abhor him. The human cost is not only physical. It is the erosion of every bond that makes a life habitable. The cycles of debate occupy a large portion of the book's 42 chapters. 3 rounds with variations progressively constrict the positions. Eliphaz eventually inventories specific sins, taking a pledge from brothers, denying water to the weary, denying bread to the hungry, sending widows away empty, breaking the arms of orphans. None of that was in the prologue. The prologue had said the opposite. Job was blameless, upright, God-fearing, and turned away from evil. The friends construct a guilty man because for them, the universe cannot tolerate a righteous man being destroyed. In chapter 31, Job pronounces a long oath of innocence. He lists eyes, steps, heart, servants, the poor, widows, orphans, gold, sun, moon, hatred of the enemy, and hospitality to the stranger. It is the ethical code of a patriarchal landowner placed under oath. If he has failed in these things, let others eat his wheat and let his wife grind for another man. The text places before you a man who would rather accept ritually cursed perjury than accept invented guilt simply to make the doctrine fit. Later, a fourth speaker bursts in. Elihu, son of Barakil the Buzite of the family of Ram, has held back because the others are older. His anger burns against Job, who justified himself rather than God, and against the 3 who had found no answer. He speaks of discipline, of dreams that turn a man away from his work, of a mediator among 1,000, of drought and storm. His section occupies chapters 32 through 37. Some ancient readers regarded him as wise. Others read him as a human prelude to the voice that comes from the whirlwind. The book gives you no explicit verdict on Elihu. It leaves you with his youthful verbosity just before the weather changes. And then the Lord answers Job out of a whirlwind. He does not explain the heavenly counsel. He does not mention Satan. He does not justify the 4 messengers. He fires questions about the foundation of the earth, about who shut the sea behind doors, about the dawn, about the gates of death, about the path of light, about hail, stored up for the time of trouble, about binding the cluster of the Pleiades and loosening the cords of Orion. Then he descends into wild life, the lioness, the raven, the mountain goat, the wild donkey, the buffalo that refuses a yoke, the ostrich that leaves its eggs on the ground, the horse that neighs before battle, the hawk and the eagle. In the second speech appear behemoth, whose strength is in its loins and whose bones are like forged steel, and Leviathan, whom no one dares to awaken, covered with tightly fitted shields, able to make the deep boil like a pot. They are creatures that overflow the human scale like a warship beside a fishing boat. God did not explain why. Job answers twice. First, he covers his mouth. Then he declares that he had spoken without understanding wonders he did not know, that he had heard by the hearing of the ear, and that now his eye sees. He despises himself and repents in dust and ashes. The Hebrew verb behind that repentance is not the equivalent of confessing the crimes the friends invented. It is the withdrawal of a lawsuit. The man retracts his case against the government of the cosmos. The book holds both truths without dissolving them into a slogan. Job was not the hypocrite Eliphaz portrayed, and Job did not possess the complete map of the universe that he demanded in order to litigate. The epilogue returns to prose. The Lord rebukes Eliphaz and his 2 companions. They have not spoken of him what is right, as his servant Job has. They must take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to Job. Job will pray for them. The Lord will accept his prayer so that he will not deal with them according to their folly. The friends obey. Job prays. And the Lord restores Job's fortunes when he prays for his friends. The text links restoration to that act, not to a formula of silent resignation. The restitution comes in doubled figures: 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, 1,000 female donkeys. Again, 7 sons and 3 daughters. The daughters receive names the narrator wants you to remember: Jemimah, Keziah, and Keren Happuch. No women as beautiful as they were could be found in all the land. Their father gives them an inheritance among their brothers. That legal clause is explosive in a world where daughters inherited only in the absence of sons, as the later legislation concerning the daughters of Zelophehad provides in Numbers chapter 27. Here there are brothers, and even so, there is female inheritance. The detail is not sentimental decoration. It is a correction of the domestic order that disaster had shattered. After this, Job lives 140 years. He sees his children and his children's children to the 4th generation. He dies old and full of days. The book does not say how old he was when the messengers arrived. Later traditions outside the canonical text imagined 70 years at the time of the disaster, so that the life afterward would be exactly double. That is a late inference, not biblical data. What the text states is enough: 140 years of watching over a rebuilt lineage. 4 generations walking through courtyards that once again have shade. The record shows something no one expects if they look only at the happy ending. The 10 dead children do not return. Twice the livestock does not cancel a name. The new set of children does not erase the table where 10 plates are missing. The genre of the story knows this. That is why it preserves the speeches. That is why it forces you to inhabit months of argument, insomnia, and pus before returning the inventory. The inner time of the poem is not measured in hours. It is measured in cycles of reply that a modern reader traverses like a novel of more than 40 chapters, longer than many contemporary judicial reports. The weekly human cost, reconstructed from Job's own laments, is concrete. Sleepless nights, bones pierced through, skin that opens under the friction of sackcloth, breath that drives his wife away, boys who mock him at the gate, a stomach that rejects bread, friends who sit nearby and speak like prosecutors. In pastoral societies, the loss of 3,000 camels is not only bankruptcy, it is the inability to pay debts, endow daughters, sustain clients, and keep peace with armed neighbors. A patriarchal household of that magnitude fed dozens or hundreds of people. The 4 attacks do not merely bereave Job. They put a local economy out of work and bury it. The mourning of the servants has no chapter of its own. It remains implicit in every refrain of the messenger. The psychological pressure has another layer. Job had feared exactly this. In chapter 3, he confesses that the thing he feared has come upon him, and that what he dreaded has happened to him. He had offered preventive sacrifices for children who drank wine in one another's houses in rotation. He had tried to manage spiritual risk the way one manages a flock. The disaster teaches him the limit of that management. No morning burnt offering stops the wind from the 4 corners. No integrity guaranteed by the prologue exempts him from the ashes. That is the tension the narrator refuses to resolve with a cheap moral. A reasonable man practices precautionary piety. The consequences are still devastating. On the other side of that scene, the literature of the ancient East offers parallels specialists know well. The Babylonian poem Ludlul Bel Nemeki, sometimes called the Babylonian Job, presents a righteous sufferer fallen into disgrace, who awaits restoration from Marduk. The Babylonian theodicy sets a sufferer and a friend arguing about the order of the world. Neither of those texts matches the Hebrew verse for verse. They do, however, help place the book of Job within an international question. What do you do when retribution fails? The biblical text distinguishes itself by the length of the dispute, by God's refusal to reveal the hidden cause, and by the explicit rebuke of the theologians of automatic guilt. Ezekiel chapter 14, verses 14 and 20 names Job alongside Noah and Daniel as models of righteousness, able to save only their own lives in a national judgment. James chapter 5, verse 11 recalls the perseverance of Job and the outcome the Lord gave him, because the Lord is very merciful and compassionate. Those later references do not rewrite the poem. They document how the figure became a paradigm. You recognize the mechanism. One particular life becomes a lens for other lives. The man of Uz did not see that posterity. He did not hear his name on the lips of an exilic prophet or in a first-century letter. He acted without seeing the cultural outcome of his case file. Weeks after the first round of speeches, nothing in Job's body has improved. The poetic narrative does not mark a clinical calendar. It marks repetition. Every answer from the friends is one more day of fever interpreted as a verdict. Every oath from Job is one more day of dignity spent on self-defense. The social isolation described in chapter 19 resembles that of a contagious patient left outside the camp, comparable to ancient quarantines in which the family leaves food at a distance. The difference is that Job remains visible. He continues to be addressed. The torment is not only the sore, it is the sore being commented on. As the days pass, the attentive reader discovers another technical detail. The prologue and epilogue are in prose. The central block is in verse. That architecture is not a whim of copyists. It encloses the chaos of complaint within an extremely controlled art. Metaphors of mining, lost caravans, papyrus beside water, the loom, the shadow of a hired worker, a swift ship, and an eagle diving upon its prey run through the speeches. Job chapter 28 inserts a hymn to wisdom that man does not find in veins of iron or in the gold of a fear. Wisdom, it says, is hidden from the eyes of every living thing. The fear of the Lord is wisdom. That chapter functions as a breathing space. Then the dispute continues. Art does not anesthetize the pus. It makes it audible centuries later. The inventory numbers deserve another pass because the text insists on them. 500 female donkeys are not a minor zoological detail. In transport and milling, that breeding stock carried loads and sustained food production much as a fleet of utility vehicles would today. The later 1,000 yoke doubled the sowing capacity. 14,000 sheep doubled the wool, milk, and possible sacrifices. 6,000 camels doubled the range of trade. The epilogue did not improvise round numbers by chance. It built a mathematical mirror of the first verse. What is not doubled is the first set of children. 7 and 3 again. The same structure, different people. The narrator names only the new daughters. The restored sons remain anonymous. That asymmetry leaves a mark. The beauty and inheritance of Jemimah, Keziah, and Keren Happuch received the light. The sons returned to the silent pattern of so many genealogies. Nothing was left standing that first afternoon. And yet the name remained. What was destroyed fits into a list that still hurts when read aloud. 10 adult children, an army of servants, 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 1,000 head of draft cattle, 500 female donkeys, the health of his skin, the respect of the public square, and the comfortable theology of his friends. What survives is harder to inventory. A literary case file survives that refuses to turn pain into automatic proof of guilt. The image survives of a man scraping his sores and still demanding to be heard. The divine refusal to become a report of causes survives. In the epilogue, a community survives that rebuilds itself around an intercessory prayer and daughters who inherit. If you know loss, you recognize the mechanics. First come the messengers, then the body, then the voices that want to explain, then the silence of a heaven that does not answer in the language of the demand. The story of Job does not ask you to imitate the stoicism of a statue. It places before you a concrete man whose integrity did not immunize him, and whose protest did not expel him from the final dialogue. The secular viewer sees the problem of evil without anesthesia. The religious viewer sees a God who vindicates the servant and rebukes the dogmatists. Both meet in the same ashes. The system of simple retribution did not survive this book intact. For centuries, entire communities returned to these pages when plague, exile, or bankruptcy disproved the easy proverb. The struggle of a shepherd of Uz, seated with a potsherd, left beyond himself a way of speaking about suffering that does not need to falsify the facts in order to protect a doctrine, acting without seeing the outcome. In the end, that was the only thing Job could do while the whirlwind had not yet risen.